These were the chilling final moments before a 23-year-old man would destroy everything his parents had built for him. Bart Halderson sat at his computer, dialing Madison Area Technical College for what should have been a routine call about his son's transcript. The customer service representative's words cut through the silence like a knife. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have no record of a Chandler Halderson being enrolled this semester. The administrators he's been emailing, those email addresses don't exist in our system." Bart's voice, captured on the recorded call, was quiet but final. "That'll be it then." He hung up the phone, and in that moment, 23 years of being the perfect father to what he thought was the perfect son came crashing down. Within hours, Bart Halderson would be dead, shot in the back by the very person he had loved, supported, and believed in without question. His wife, Krista, would follow shortly after. Their bodies would be dismembered, burned, and scattered across Wisconsin like pieces of a life that had all been built on lies. To the outside world, the Halderson family was everything an American family aspired to be: successful, loving, and filled with promise. Neighbors admired them, friends respected them, and everyone believed their youngest son, Chandler, was destined for greatness. But behind their perfect facade lay the darkest of secrets, a web of lies so elaborate, so consuming, that when it finally unraveled, it would lead to a bloodbath that no one could have imagined. Let's rewind the clock and uncover how this perfect family became the stage for one of Wisconsin's most shocking murders, orchestrated by the very person they trusted most. Bart and Krista Halderson had built what many would consider the American dream in their quiet home in Windsor, Wisconsin. Bart worked as an accountant with a steady income and methodical approach to life that had served their family well for decades. Krista was the heart of their household, beloved by her co-workers and devoted entirely to her two sons. She was the kind of person who poured everything into her children, always believing the best in them and supporting their dreams, no matter how big they seemed. Their older son Mitchell had grown into exactly what parents hope for: responsible, hardworking, engaged to be married, and building a career in tech. At 24, he was proof that the Halderson approach to parenting worked. But it was their younger son Chandler who seemed destined for even greater things. Chandler, Michael Halderson, born March 15, 1998, had always been charismatic and ambitious. By all appearances, he was thriving. At 23, he was living at home while finishing his degree in renewable energy engineering at Madison Area Technical College. He worked part-time for American Family Insurance, handling remote work from his bedroom. He even volunteered as a scuba diver with the Madison Police Department and the Department of Natural Resources. Impressive credentials for someone so young. But what truly made Bart and Krista proud was the news Chandler shared in June 2021. He had landed a job with SpaceX, Elon Musk's revolutionary aerospace company. He would be moving to Titusville, Florida, near the launch facilities, and his girlfriend, Catherine Melander, was planning to join him. He had already, he claimed, rented an apartment and bought a car for their new life together. It was the kind of success story that made parents beam with pride. Their son wasn't just going to be successful, he was going to be part of something that would literally reach for the stars. Barbie Townsend, Krista's cousin, remembered how happy and proud the family seemed. They were 100% about family, she said. Krista was very involved in scouting with the boys. She was someone who poured her heart into her two sons. Friends and neighbors saw the family as the picture of success and stability. Chandler was polite, ambitious, and seemed to have his life figured out at such a young age. His girlfriend Catherine was smitten with him, and they appeared to be building a bright future together. But beneath this perfect surface, cracks had been forming for months. The truth was far darker than anyone could have imagined, and the warning signs had been hiding in plain sight, masked by the very charisma that made Chandler so believable to everyone around him. The foundation of Chandler's entire life was built on lies, elaborate, carefully constructed deceptions that had taken on a life of their own. What started as small fabrications had grown into a massive web of deceit that required constant maintenance and increasingly desperate measures to keep intact. The truth that Chandler had hidden from everyone, including his parents, was devastating in its simplicity. He had flunked out of Madison Area Technical College after just one semester. There was no renewable energy engineering degree in his future. There was no job with American Family Insurance. He had never even applied. The volunteer work with Madison Police and the Department of Natural Resources. Complete fiction. The prestigious SpaceX job. Another elaborate lie. Instead of attending classes or going to work, Chandler spent his days in his bedroom playing video games and crafting an increasingly complex fantasy life. He had become a master manipulator, waking up early to fake business calls so his father wouldn't suspect anything was wrong. When Bart, working remotely during the pandemic, asked about meetings or work, Chandler had ready explanations that seemed perfectly reasonable. The lies about American Family Insurance became increasingly elaborate as Bart, an accountant with a keen eye for financial details, kept asking why his son wasn't making any money, despite supposedly working for nearly a year. His father was an accountant, pretty much daily asking, "Why don't you have any money? Why haven't you paid any rent?" Prosecutor William Brown would later tell the jury, and Chandler spun an amazing web of lies. First, Chandler claimed the company had mistakenly classified him as an hourly worker instead of salary, causing paycheck delays. Then he said he had provided the wrong direct deposit information. Next, he claimed the bank thought his paychecks were fake because they were so large. To support these stories, he created fake email accounts and staged entire conversations between himself and fictitious HR representatives, forwarding these fabricated exchanges to his father as proof of the supposed bureaucratic problems. But even for someone as skilled at deception as Chandler, maintaining these lies became increasingly difficult. The pressure from his father to pay rent and contribute to the household was mounting. That's when Chandler made his most audacious lie yet, the SpaceX job offer. The best way out of your pretend job is an even more pretend job, Prosecutor Brown would later say. He's going to be an astronaut. Chandler told his family and girlfriend that Elon Musk's company had hired him and that he would be working at their Titusville, Florida facility. He and Catherine made elaborate plans for their move, with Chandler claiming he had already secured housing and transportation. The lie was so convincing that even Catherine, who had been in a relationship with him for 2 years, believed it completely. When questions arose about why he hadn't moved to Florida yet, Chandler fabricated a serious injury. He claimed to have fallen down the stairs and suffered a traumatic brain injury, complete with hematoma, spinal damage, nerve damage, and the need for a colostomy bag. He wore a neck brace and told people he couldn't drive, couldn't fly, and couldn't travel, conveniently explaining why his move to SpaceX kept getting delayed. But by early July 2021, the walls were closing in. Bart's financial instincts told him something wasn't right, and he decided to investigate his son's claims directly. That's when he made the phone call to Madison Area Technical College that would expose everything and seal his own fate. July 1st, 2021 started like any other day in the Halderson household, but it would end with unspeakable horror. Bart had scheduled a meeting for himself and Chandler at Madison Area Technical College, a meeting that, unknown to Bart, couldn't possibly exist because Chandler wasn't enrolled there. The pressure had been building for weeks. Bart's discovery that none of the college administrators Chandler had been emailing actually existed meant there was no way to avoid the truth any longer. The phone call to Matt C. had confirmed Bart's worst suspicions. His son had been lying to him for months, maybe longer. That afternoon, Bart sent what would be his final text message to Chandler. "I'm ready whenever you are." Instead of driving to the college for a meeting that would expose all of his lies, Chandler made a decision that would destroy 2 lives and shatter his family forever. Using a high-powered rifle that had been given to him by a friend, he shot his father in the back, not once, but twice. The man who had worked tirelessly to provide for his family, who had believed in his son's potential and supported his dreams, died in his own home at the hands of the person he loved most. But Chandler's nightmare was just beginning. His mother, Krista, was still alive, still believing in the son she had raised and nurtured. When she came home that day, she had no idea what had transpired, no warning of the danger that awaited her. Chandler killed her too, eliminating the only other person who could expose what he had done. The quiet house in Windsor, Wisconsin, once filled with the warmth of a loving family, became a crime scene of unimaginable brutality. What happened next reveals the true depths of Chandler's callousness. Rather than calling for help, rather than showing any remorse or humanity, he began the methodical process of covering up his crimes. Over the next few days, while the rest of the world assumed Bart and Krista were enjoying a holiday weekend at their cabin, Chandler was dismembering their bodies. The evidence would later show that he used the family fireplace to try to burn parts of his parents' remains. Over 200 human bone fragments would be found in the Haldersons' fireplace, pieces of the very people who had given him life and supported him through everything. Security cameras from a neighbor's home captured flickering light from the Halderson house during this time. Light that prosecutors would argue came from the fireplace where Chandler was burning his parents' bodies. The image of that flickering light, recorded by chance, would become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the case. But even dismembering and burning his parents wasn't enough to hide what Chandler had done. He needed to scatter their remains where they would never be found. And that's where his web of lies would finally begin to unravel. While Chandler was methodically destroying evidence of his horrific crimes, the outside world was beginning to notice that something was wrong. Krista hadn't shown up for work on July 2nd, which immediately concerned her coworker and friend, Daniel Kroninger. He tried calling and texting, but received no response. Worried about his friend, Kroninger drove to the Halderson house and found Chandler at home. When asked where his parents were, Chandler calmly explained that they had gone to the family cabin for the 4th of July weekend. He seemed appropriately concerned about their lack of communication, even joining in the worry that something might be wrong. But as the days passed and Bart and Krista still hadn't returned any calls or messages, the concern grew into alarm. Kroninger urged Chandler to contact police for help in finding his parents. On July 7th, 6 days after he had murdered them, Chandler finally called the Dane County Sheriff's Office to report Bart and Krista missing. His story was carefully crafted. He told deputies that his parents had left on July 2nd to go to their cabin in Langlade County, northern Wisconsin, a 3-hour drive from their home. They had gone, he claimed, with another couple that he didn't know, and were supposed to be back by now. He said the last communication he'd had from them was a text from his mother on July 4th, saying they had arrived at the cabin and were planning to attend a parade. But investigators quickly found problems with Chandler's story. There was no parade scheduled in the area on July 4th. When Chandler's older brother Mitchell drove to the cabin with sheriff's deputies, they found it dark and obviously unused. The canoe was still there, covered in dust. No one had been to the cabin in months. More red flags emerged during the investigation. Both of Bart and Krista's cars were still in the garage at home. Detective Sabrina Sims noted that it was completely out of character for the frugal Haldersons to go gambling at casinos, as Chandler had suggested they might do. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source: Chandler's own girlfriend. Catherine Melander had given investigators permission to download data from her phone, including her Snapchat information. Because Chandler had cheated on her in the past, she had been using Snapchat's location tracking feature to keep tabs on his whereabouts. The data revealed something shocking. On July 3rd, Chandler's phone had pinged at a remote location near the Wisconsin River, a spot investigators would later learn was one of his favorite swimming holes. Even more importantly, Melander had taken a screenshot of this location and saved it to her phone. When detectives searched that area based on the Snapchat evidence, they made a horrific discovery: dismembered human remains that would later be identified as Krista Halderson's legs. But Chandler's movements on the Snapchat map told an even more sinister story. Another location showed him on July 5th at a farm in Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, property belonging to his girlfriend's family. A witness reported seeing him backing his vehicle up near a wooded area with the rear hatch open, then walking out of the forest in a way that seemed suspicious. When investigators searched that location, they found Bart Halderson's torso, along with an oil drum containing scissors, a saw blade, and bolt cutters, all spattered with blood. The methodical, calculated way Chandler had disposed of his parents' remains revealed the true depths of his depravity. The investigation moved quickly once the physical evidence began to emerge. On July 8th, just one day after reporting his parents missing, Chandler was arrested for providing false information to law enforcement. But investigators suspected much worse. During his interview with detectives, Chandler maintained his story about his parents going to the cabin with unknown friends. But the evidence was mounting against him, and his behavior was raising more red flags with every passing hour. Perhaps most disturbing was what investigators discovered about Chandler's internet searches on the morning of his arrest. Between his staged interviews with news outlets, where he played the concerned son desperate to find his missing parents, he had made 6 consecutive Google searches that revealed his true state of mind. He had searched for body found Wisconsin, woman's body found Wisconsin, Wisconsin dismembered body found, and dead body found in Wisconsin. While publicly pleading for help finding his parents, he was privately monitoring news reports to see if their remains had been discovered. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Alex Gravatt, Chandler's childhood friend, learned about it on social media. "I checked my phone and saw that he had been arrested," Gravatt said. "My eyes got wide. I kind of just sat there for a second reading it. It was pretty wild." For Barbie Townsend, Krista's cousin, the arrest was the moment when the unthinkable became real. "That was the first day that I started to suspect foul play from their own son," she said. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Bart's autopsy revealed he had been shot at least twice in the back, wounds that would have killed him almost instantly. The fact that he was shot from behind suggested he had been caught completely off guard, possibly by someone he trusted. When questioned after his arrest, Chandler made statements that chilled investigators to the bone. According to court documents, he told officers, "You don't know the whole story," and that he didn't feel bad about what I did. There was no remorse, no grief for the parents he had killed, only cold calculation about how to minimize the consequences for himself. The pattern of lies that had defined Chandler's life for months was now extending to his interactions with law enforcement. But this time, the stakes weren't about college grades or fake jobs. This time, the lies were about murder, and the evidence was too overwhelming to explain away. Sheriff Calvin Barrett, in his press conferences during the investigation, expressed the community's shock and confusion. "This is one of the most extensive investigations the Dane County Sheriff's Office has faced," he said. "Our detectives, deputies, and civilian staff worked tirelessly to determine what really happened to Bart and Krista." But as the investigation continued, it became clear that the most important question wasn't what had happened. It was why. What could drive a young man to murder the parents who had loved and supported him? The answer lay in the psychology of deception and the length someone will go to avoid facing the consequences of their lies. As the full scope of Chandler's deception began to emerge, investigators and psychologists struggled to understand the mind that had orchestrated such an elaborate con game. This wasn't a case of a teenager telling white lies to avoid getting in trouble. This was a systematic, long-term campaign of deception that had consumed every aspect of Chandler's life. The fake emails alone numbered in the hundreds. Chandler had created entire fictional personas: college administrators, HR representatives, supervisors, complete with email addresses and detailed backstories. He had conversations with these fictional people, forwarding the exchanges to his parents as proof of his legitimate life. The level of detail and consistency required to maintain these fabrications revealed a mind capable of extraordinary manipulation. But perhaps most chilling was how normal Chandler appeared to everyone around him. His girlfriend Catherine testified that they had a typical relationship. Dinner dates, movie nights, walks together. She had no idea that the person she loved was living a complete fantasy. Even close friends like Alex Gravatt had no inkling of the truth. He seemed like a normal kid who enjoyed video games, playing with his dogs, and spending time with his girlfriend, his defense attorney would later argue. But this normalcy was itself a performance, another layer in the elaborate deception that had become Chandler's entire existence. The pressure of maintaining these lies had been building for months. Every day required new fabrications, new excuses, new layers to add to the web of deceit. When Bart started asking harder questions about money and transcripts, when he began to independently verify his son's claims, the whole structure began to collapse. prosecutor William Brown painted a picture of a young man who had backed himself into an impossible corner. There was no way out of his lies, Brown told the jury. The SpaceX job was supposed to be his escape route, a way to leave Wisconsin and start fresh somewhere else where no one could verify his claims. But even that elaborate fiction was falling apart as the move date approached. The fake concussion and neck brace were Chandler's desperate attempt to buy more time. By claiming serious injuries that prevented him from traveling, he could delay the SpaceX move indefinitely. But his father's phone call to Madison Area Technical College had made delay impossible. The truth was about to come out, and Chandler faced a choice: admit to his lies and face the consequences, or eliminate the people who could expose him. What's most disturbing is how calculated and methodical his choice proved to be. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary loss of control. After killing his parents, Chandler spent days dismembering their bodies, burning their remains, and scattering the pieces across multiple locations. He continued to maintain his false persona, giving interviews to news outlets about his missing parents, while secretly monitoring internet searches to see if their bodies had been found. Detective Brian Shunk, one of the lead investigators, reflected on the case. "You know, he just lied to everybody. But these weren't ordinary lies. They were the kind of comprehensive deceptions that revealed a complete disconnect from reality and a chilling absence of empathy for the people closest to him." The transformation from beloved son to cold-blooded killer hadn't happened overnight. It was the culmination of months of increasingly desperate deceptions, each lie requiring more lies to support it, until the entire structure became too heavy to maintain. When it finally collapsed, it buried everything underneath, including the two people who had loved Chandler most. The trial of Chandler Halderson began in January 2022, nearly 6 months after the murders that had shocked Wisconsin. Prosecutor William Brown's opening statement was methodical and devastating, walking the jury through the timeline of deception that led to double murder. The evidence was overwhelming. Over 200 human bone fragments were found in the Halderson fireplace. The rifle used in the murders was discovered near Bart's remains. Security camera footage showed flickering light from the family home during the time prosecutors argued Chandler was burning his parents' bodies. But perhaps the most powerful evidence came from Catherine Melander, Chandler's girlfriend, who had unknowingly provided the key to solving the case. Her testimony was emotional as she described the young man she thought she knew. "We would grab dinners, have movie dates, just sit at home and watch movies," she testified through tears. Most damaging of all was her Snapchat evidence that led investigators directly to Krista's remains. Defense attorney Catherine Dorrell faced an impossible task. The evidence against her client was overwhelming, and Chandler chose not to testify in his own defense. "All the state was able to prove is that Chandler is a liar, not a killer," defense attorney Crystal Vera argued. But the physical evidence told a different story. The locations where remains were found corresponded exactly to places Chandler had been tracked via phone and social media. The trial lasted several weeks, but the jury needed only 2 hours to reach their verdict. On January 20th, 2022, Chandler Halderson was found guilty on all 8 counts. Chandler showed no emotion as the verdicts were read. He stared straight ahead, displaying the same cold detachment that had characterized his behavior throughout. On March 17th, 2022, Chandler returned to court for sentencing. The victim impact statements were heartbreaking. Barbie Townsend, speaking for Krista's family, struggled to find words. "You couldn't write this," she said. "We don't have a why, and that's the hard part." When given the opportunity to address the court, Chandler showed no remorse. Instead, he asked if there were any lawyers willing to take his appeal. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain he had caused. Judge Hyland sentenced him to life in prison without parole, the mandatory sentence for his crimes. The young man who had once claimed he was destined to work among the stars would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. Today, Chandler serves his sentence at the Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin. His appeals have been unsuccessful. The case shattered assumptions about families we think we know. The perfect suburban home became a crime scene, a reminder that the darkest secrets can hide behind normal facades. For those who had loved and trusted Chandler, the realization was devastating. The person they thought they knew had never really existed. The charming, ambitious young man had been nothing more than a performance, a lie that fooled everyone until it was too late. The web of lies that Chandler thought would save him became the very evidence that condemned him. The Snapchat locations, the fake emails, the elaborate deceptions, all of it led investigators directly back to him. But no verdict can bring back Bart and Krista Halderson. They remain victims, not just of murder, but of the ultimate betrayal, killed by the son they had loved unconditionally, the son they had believed in even when he had given up on himself. The flickering light in the Halderson home that security cameras captured during those terrible July days has been extinguished forever, but the questions it illuminates about deception, trust, and the capacity for evil within seemingly ordinary people continue to burn, serving as a stark reminder of how far someone might go to avoid facing the truth about who they really are.